I knew this couple. The dad was not like that at all, but you could see why the nurse would say, I need to get an answer from her. Now, mom was in such intense labor at this point, she wasn't even having it. Finally, she was like, F no, I don't want it, don't ask again. But, you know, dad was trying really hard to be polite, but the nurse at that point was a by-the-book nurse, and she needed to know the answer from mom, no matter how many times dad said. So, again, if it's something that you feel strongly about, you guys have to deny it. Ladies, you have to ask for it to not happen, or to happen. But again, my personal opinion is I don't think it's a big deal. The reason why I see it getting in the way is, and again, you're not always hooked to something at all. You're not hooked to anything most of the time. But if you want to get in the bath, they like it to stay dry. So again, you're sort of wearing this glove and you're worried about it. It's not the worst thing if you get a little drips of water on it, but you can't submerge it into the water. They don't like that. And so again, you're already uncomfortable in the bath, you're in labor, and you're like trying to get your arm out of the water. And it just it's one more intervention, so it can be uncomfortable for some people. But the pros of having it placed and not fighting the policy about it are, it can move to, if something moves really quickly and it turns into an emergency, you have that already there instead of them trying to find a vein, you know, in the middle of an emergency. And I personally think that you cannot get enough fluid when you're in labor at the hospital. So my thought is, if you're getting that, the next thing you need to ask for is a bag of saline. Okay, I'm here. You just gave me this. We're sitting here. I'm answering your questions. Go ahead and give me a direct bag, because the more hydrated I am, the better. Dr. Peterson would disagree with me on this, because she thinks that too much fluid in your system can lead to puffier babies when they come out, and they're a little bit bigger. And then what happens is, so they're a little overhydrated because you're a little overhydrated. And the weight is skewed when the babies first come out. So they're going to be 7 pounds, 8 ounces, when maybe they would have been 7'4". And so in their 1 week follow-up, they're going to be a little bit, the weight loss is going to look greater. It's just up to you and your provider. I think it's either here, it's neither here nor there. I like the extra fluid and electrolytes for when delivery, but she thinks it's not as good for the baby. Not that it's harmful for the baby, but it's just not always in the baby's best interest. So it is an IV dose, and it is controllable. So you can turn Pitocin up and down as opposed to Cytotec. It's a one dose, you don't control, you know, turning it up or down. So Pitocin, they'll say, well, we're going to start on a 2 and see what happens. And if that gets things going, then great. Then they will keep it at a 2. Sometimes, and this is what I want you to write down, you can advocate to turn it off. Okay? If it's working and labor has gotten going and you've established a good contraction rhythm, you can ask for them to turn it off. And sometimes all you need is that little jump start, because they don't always turn it off automatically. Yeah?
Does our hospital allow us to eat and drink, like after we're admitted?
Yes.
They do?
It's a good question. Yep. They will allow you to eat and drink anything that you want, but they will kind of tell you to be cautious. Now, if it looks like it's going to be potentially a C-section, if they're getting a bad rate on the baby that they don't like and they're monitoring you pretty heavily, then they're going to probably suggest that you do Jello, broth, that sort of stuff. But yes, you can drink water especially. I mean, they're really pushing that, which is good. But at that point, I'm hoping that by the time you get to the hospital, you're not really in the mood to eat. But I attended a birth. They brought this no-lie blue cooler in that was huge, and opened it up. There was dried cherries, and there was elk jerky, and then on the bottom there was some beer, and you know, I mean, they were picnicking. And the mother was like, "Are you kidding me?" And we're not even going to touch that. And the dad looked so disappointed. He said, "Do you want some cherries?" I mean, their labor was so far progressed by the time they got to the hospital that it was not even going to be a picnic at that point. But it was really cool that they thought about it. But I would also bring your own, because I mean, they have those. What are those ice pops that are made in Steamboat with the electrolytes? Power ice. They have tons of those. And but I would bring your own beverages as far as stuff with electrolyte, because you might love a certain flavor of Gatorade or Recharge or whatever, or coconut water, and they're not going to have that. So I would do that. Good question. So the risks and benefits of Pitocin. Okay, so oxytocin is naturally occurring, and it's lovely, as we all know, okay? But Pitocin is less lovely. And the reason why Pitocin is less lovely is because Pitocin doesn't cross the brain barrier, okay? So you get all the like intense labor feelings that oxytocin would give you, but you don't get that lovey-dovey feeling in your brain that a naturally occurring and augmented labor would give you. So you get everything that needs to happen physically, but none of the mental stuff, which is hard, because when you're having a labor, quote unquote, that's typical, you get both, because the oxytocin is naturally released in your body, and so you can handle it a little bit easier. You do have this sort of lovey-dovey feeling in your head and la-la land, even though you're in labor. Pitocin is not so much, okay? And not to say that because you have Pitocin coursing through your veins, that they're administering doesn't mean that you don't have your own oxytocin that's also there. It's just not working quite the way it should. Oxytocin is released in pulses, whereas Pitocin is just in one continuous stream through your body, okay? So it's nicer to have it in pulses because it gives you a little break too. Like I said, Pit does not cross the blood-brain barrier, so you don't get that lovey feeling. And so I said it better as I wrote it. So oxytocin does, and thus is able to affect behavior and attitude of mom during labor, okay? And then Pitocin can cause the need for internal monitoring. Now when we wear those monitors when we're in labor, they will put 2 monitors on you when you are being monitored, and they will monitor you for the first 45 minutes that you arrive, and then 15 minutes every hour thereafter. And the way those monitors look, they put a little belly band on them, and one monitors the baby's heart rate, and one monitors your contractions. Now the only way it monitors your contraction is it feels pressure, because remember I talked about how the contraction feels harder on your head. I mean down here it feels like this up here. It feels pressure that you're having contractions. So on the monitor next to you on the computer, it'll say, oh, she's having a contraction, oh, it's getting harder. But it does not monitor the intensity of the contraction, just the fact that you're having one in the duration, so how long it is. So if they're trying to make sure that the Pitocin is working, because the reason we have Pitocin is because contractions haven't been effective or regular or working, they might put an internal monitor in, and that is a little teeny tiny tube that, I never know how to put this, I never know if I should say this to the class, but it goes right into the baby's scalp, okay? And I don't know who was in 6th or 7th grade where they would put little pins like under their skin on their fingers and like walk around like, do you guys remember this? Like, you know, a sewing pin, a sewing needle, I should say. You remember? Okay. It goes right under your skin, and then you don't feel a thing, but you have pins sticking out. Okay. It's the same thing. You did it, right?
I can do it.
You're gonna go home and do it. I make you see it.
You still do it.
Yeah, you still do it. And then you have then you can push it against the wall and like click clack all over. But so it's the same principle. It sounds scarier than it is. It just monitors on the baby's scalp, so it's a scalp monitor, the intensity of the contractions. Don't be afraid, I'm giving you more information than you want to know, but I like to tell you guys this because I like to see who has done the little finger thing. So, but that is how it's monitored, and then they will, again, you have one more tube coming out of you. So, but it is a way to monitor how strong the contractions actually are, because the external monitor won't do that.
You said that you have another tube coming out of you.
Oh yes.
Are there, what other tubes are coming out?
We'll get there.
Okay.
We will get there.
Okay.
And it's not you, it's actually Liza. Just,
yes.
Yeah, I am speaking to, yes. Okay, we'll get there. So, and not every time do you get Pitocin do you get that internal monitor, just to make sure you know that. So it is more, I attended a birth this summer where they really needed to see how the baby was responding to the contractions. It wasn't to monitor her contractions, but it was a way to get a really good pulse on the baby. And because the external pulse, again, isn't always perfect, and sometimes you can pick up mom's heartbeat, and sometimes you can, and so they just, to get a good baby pulse, they'll do that as well, because that records the baby's pulse. Okay, and another pro of Pitocin is it can get labor started when it's stalled, and you're preventing a cesarean birth. Okay, so again, ultimately, not that cesareans are terrible, trust me, but if you can prevent it, even with something like Pitocin, that's a good thing. Okay? So any questions about Pitocin at this point? Not too scary? Did I scare anyone, really? I hope not, okay. It's necessary sometimes. I would try to avoid it if you can. And most of the time you can't. But again, by having the breast pump in there with you and by advocating and saying, okay, her water broke, nothing's happening, but can we get on the breast pump for a while? What else can we try? Or being able to advocate to turn it off after it's gotten things going, all good things, okay? If you feel like, I would rather not have this.
Are there other weird side effects?
Of Pitocin?
Yeah.
Not that have been extensively researched, okay? No. Nothing that I would feel comfortable saying in here and standing behind it as it's being recorded. Talk to me later, maybe.
Which ones are the most common that they use at the hospital?
Well, it totally depends because they will give Pitocin if someone is already dilated or if their water is broken. Pretty consistently. They'll give Cytotec for someone whose water has not broken and has not started contractions. So it really just depends on what your situation is.
So like a medical situation, you go, you've had high blood pressure or whatever, they're gonna give you
Cytotec.
Yeah.
Okay. Most likely. Yeah. Cytotec is more something that, okay, we got some time.
Yeah.
The medical situation isn't huge, but we do not want her to go longer than
Or if
X
they're
amount of
like,
weeks.
if you have, yeah, exactly.
Exactly. They're going to say, let's get things going with Cytotec.
If you haven't had the baby by this time.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah. And I'm speaking off the cuff. I don't know exactly what the numbers, but I think that situation arises more than
The Pitocin situation.
the Pitocin situation comes up a lot when you're already in there. They're not